changed to barefoot because I think it's better to run barefoot because I get less injuries than I used to when I was wearing shoes.
Like, how so? How?
Well, I changed my strike pattern. So like I used to strike with my heel, which gave me a lot of injuries in my legs, and now I strike with a forefoot strike, so I get less injuries.
So when you had shoes, you were running heel striking, and when you run barefoot, you change foot.
Yeah, changed to forefoot.
Oh, okay.
Well, like, don't you step on stuff?
Sometimes I do like rocks or like random trash or whatever, but like your foot gets used to it. You like gain calluses that kind of prevent you from hurting. Sometimes I do wear minimalist shoes or Vibram, which helps. Yeah, which helps prevent like stepping on things.
So it's like an extra layer of protection.
Exactly.
With those.
Yeah.
But it's still like running barefoot.
Yeah.
So it's really thin.
Yeah. There's no support in it.
Okay.
Interesting.
Maybe we should do that.
Yeah. Well, but shoes give you so much cushion. Like, isn't that better? Like, more protection?
Yeah, I mean, it's less impact on your body, right? I mean, you don't have any protection.
I mean, the impact is now like on my forefoot rather than my heel. If that makes sense.
So it like spreads it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Well, maybe we should. Well, how did you transition from shod to barefoot running?
Well, I use my Vibram or my minimalist shoes, and I used to wear them just like everyday activities. And slowly I would like put them into my run. Like if I ran 30 miles, I would wear them for like 5 miles, and then do regular shoes for the rest. And then like slowly increase how long I wear the minimalist shoes.
Oh, okay. So it takes a while then.
Yeah, it took me like 2 months, but after that, I'm perfectly fine.
Do you think we should switch? Because like my foot hurts. Yeah.
I mean, it looks cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I mean, I'm curious to see what the research says.
Yeah. Let's look.
As Kelly brought up, more often than not, those who run with shoes on will heel strike, while most people who run barefoot will typically forefoot or midfoot strike. Looking at the kinetics, which are the forces causing motion, with each style of running, there is a significant difference between the two. Starting with shod running, we see the initial striking of the foot causing a steep slope into the impact transient. The impact transient is the smaller hump right before the big peak. The big peak, also called the active peak, occurs when the foot is below the body's center of mass. Barefoot running has different ground reaction forces compared to shod running. The biggest difference is that there is no impact transient with barefoot running due to the typical forefoot or midfoot striking. Another important factor is the loading rates. The loading rate is the speed at which you apply forces to the body. In other words, it is related to the slope. Because there is no impact transient, the loading rates leading up to the big peak or active peak are lower in barefoot than in shod running. The research to back this up is from Chung and Rainbow, showing that compared to shod running, both vertical average rates and instantaneous loading rates significantly reduced during barefoot running. Another important difference between the two styles of running is that the time the foot is in contact with the ground is actually shorter in barefoot running than shod running. So when there is less time that the feet are in contact with the ground, there is less impact on the body as a whole.
Wow, that's crazy. I had no idea that running barefoot meant that you forefoot strike, which means you're spending less time on the ground.
Yeah, so that would mean that you're spending more time in the aerial phase, which is also interesting too because when you're barefoot running, your body seems to protect itself more, protects your feet more. So when you plant, your foot is underneath your center of mass. So it also relates to leg stiffness and protecting the body.
Interesting. That's interesting because leg stiffness, you use a calculation that has ground reaction forces in it, which you just researched.
Crazy. Let's look at leg stiffness more.
Leg stiffness is defined here in this equation as K leg equals negative F over L, with F being the vertical ground reaction force and L the leg length during stance phase. In order to calculate leg stiffness, we take the maximum GRF, ground reaction force, and the absolute value of leg compression. Stiffness is hard to approximate due to the fact that it is based on numerous factors such as contact time, flight time, resting leg length, body mass, and the leg's touchdown angle. It is also measured according to the spring mass model pictured here, which acts as a predictor for leg stiffness. Point K leg is the stiffness in the spring that we are looking for. One external factor that you, the runner, can change to have an effect on limb stiffness is whether you choose to run barefoot, with minimalist footwear, or with shoes. Those who ran barefoot in the experiment experienced less peak limb stiffness, and those who wore high-cost shoes experienced greater limb stiffness. There is also evidence of a major difference between the way high-arched and low-arched runners run that has a major effect on leg stiffness. Runners with high arches had greater limb stiffness than runners with low arches. 19 runners with greater limb stiffness had a higher incidence of bony injuries, whereas runners with lower limb stiffness experienced more soft tissue injuries in the distal extremity. In other words, the experiments did not discuss the appropriate limb stiffness because there is no one appropriate limb stiffness. Each is dependent upon the individual and their style of running, and whether they are comfortable running with shoes or without shoes.
Wow, I wonder if those injuries relate to injuries caused in rear foot and forefoot strike.
There is a lot of research pointing to barefoot running to reduce injury because habitually barefoot runners tend to adopt, in most cases, forefoot strike or midfoot strike patterns, according to Curry, Madskin, and Murphy. Forefoot strike and midfoot strike patterns create more surface area, spreading out the vertical impact forces, which creates a smaller ground reaction force compared to shod runners. In rearfoot strike runners, there is a more localized point of collision with the ground, leading to overuse injuries like patellofemoral pain syndrome and tibial stress fractures. Rearfoot strike also tend to plant their foot farther in front of their center of mass, which can also increase the chance of getting tibial stress fractures. However, barefoot running forefoot strike patterns, which cause a higher peak pressure on the forefoot, increases risk for metatarsal stress fractures, according to Curry, Madskin, and Murphy. Barefoot running associated with forefoot strike pattern can increase metatarsal stress fractures due to the increase of ground reaction force on the metatarsals. Just as rearfoot strike can increase ground reaction force on the heel, forefoot strike and midfoot strike can also increase ground reaction force and peak pressure on the forefoot.
So, what did we learn today? Well, we learned that injuries are multifactorial events, and it may not just be the shoe, and it may not be your strike pattern.
Okay, so should I run with shoes or should I run barefoot?
Well, do you know how you strike the ground?
I typically feel rear foot strike.
Rear foot strike. Well, if you rear foot strike and you're rear foot striking in shoes, people who switch to barefoot running tend to continue to rear foot strike, which can cause a lot of injuries because you're putting all of that peak pressure in one area. So, if you do want to go barefoot, you need to be committed to changing your strike pattern. Okay. So, if you go to barefoot running, it could work out for you, but also you need to know too that you may get injuries in the ball of your foot because you're putting all that pressure on the ball of your foot, so then you can get metatarsal stress fractures as well.
So it's not so much that changing whether you run shod or whether you're barefoot running, it's not going to prevent you from injuries. Both of them can get injured.
Right, because it just really depends on the person. So if you rear foot strike and you've had no issues and you've been running in shoes, then that may be totally fine for you. But if you've had injuries in shoes, maybe the first step is to change your strike pattern in the shoes. See if that helps, and if that still doesn't help, then you can change your strike pattern and go to minimalist running. But you also need to look at what else you're doing during the week. Are you increasing your mileage? Are you running on a different terrain? Are you not eating properly? Have you had other injuries? Because that can all be factors into why you're getting injured. And if you're not injured, why change it?
I'll say.
Okay, start over.
I don't like
Dead
that.
4 foot.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Where should I look? No, I'm just kidding.
Wow. Wow, I had no idea. Wow, I wonder if those.
Oh, sorry.
Wow, wow, that's crazy. If you're a glider or a gazelle, that's it.